Hi, and welcome to Homo Ludens, a channel on history and board games. In today's video, we'll look at a game released in late 2018 on the Finnish Civil War, Helsinki 1918, by U&P Games. I structured this review in 4 parts. First, the historical context of the game to provide a general understanding of the event depicted. Then, a game and component overview to see how the game plays and what it looks like. After that, I'll give a proper game review to discuss the game design, is it fun, and should you get it? And finally, I will do an analysis on the Ludic culture around the Finnish Civil War. Let's jump into it. This is intended as a quick overview to the events leading to the Battle of Helsinki. If you want to know more about the Finnish Civil War, I added some sources in the description. Finland was part of the Russian Empire since the beginning of the 19th century, but still had a certain level of autonomy. Its own laws, administration, and Finnish citizens were not part of the Russian army. For this reason, Finns didn't participate in the First World War, as there was no conscription. The political autonomy made it possible for a Finnish Social Democrat Party to operate openly and legally as of 1899. This party had, for a social basis, the growing working class composed of agrarian and factory workers. When the Russian Revolution started in 1917, the Finnish Social Democratic Party was divided on what strategy to take, but finally decided to join the national coalition with the liberals and conservatives. During summertime, food riot broke out, and the radical wing of the SDP denounced the liberals' government unwillingness to address the issue. Otto Kuisen, a socialist leader, said at that time, "The hungry working masses soon lost all confidence in the coalition government." In parallel of those rising social struggles, political conflict reached its peak when the socialist majority passed the Valtakali Bill, or Law of Supreme Power, to officialize Finland's full independence. When this was refused by the Russian Provisional Government, the Finnish conservatives and liberals seized the opportunity. They supported the Russian decision to reject the Law of Supreme Power and demanded for new general elections. The non-socialist forces won a narrow majority, which even further radicalized labor movements. But when the October Revolution happened in Russia, the non-socialist majority now really wanted a full independence and fast. A compromise solution was proposed by the Agrarian League, a reformist left-wing party that was based on the Valtakali Bill, previously rejected. This new attempt at independence was this time accepted by the newly formed Bolsheviks government in Russia. This new rise in political tension between socialists and conservatives, the internal tension within the SDP around the debate of parliamentary mean versus revolutionary mean to get power, and the influence of the Russian Bolsheviks finally led to the creation of a workers' order guard, a red armed militia, in response to the conservatives' creation of the White Guard. This escalation of rivalry between radicalized political parties triggered the Civil War in January of 1918. The Reds took control of the urban south, and Whites mostly the northern rural areas. The lack of professional soldiers on either side made the forces weak, and both performed rather poorly in the first few months of the war. But the Reds had the upper hand and managed a few offensives to reduce resistance pockets in the south and take control of a couple of cities up north. But once again, Russia will have a huge impact on Finland's history. As Russia signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, putting an end to the war between Russia and Germany, remaining Russian soldiers started to leave Finland, and Germans could now intervene in Finland without risking the armistice negotiation with Russia. The German Baltic Sea Division landed in southern Finland beginning of April 1918, behind the Red Lines, and on the 11th they were already approaching Helsinki. And this is where the game starts. As the red player, you have limited military resources. Most of your troops are up north, fighting against the white. You have no hopes of holding the city. Your main focus is to delay German forces as long as possible so that the Red Western Army gets enough time to escape east before being cut off between the Germans and the whites. The Germans, on the other hand, want to take Helsinki as fast as possible and avoid all unnecessary losses. A German naval task force is ready to disembark in Helsinki on the Reds' rear. For the Whites, it's mostly an insurgency operation, leveraging the local bourgeoisie and underground White Guards. The plan is to start an armed uprising in Helsinki to help the Germans, but also to improve the credibility of the movement to obtain a better negotiating position in the future discussion about Finland's independence. Now that we have the context, let's look at what's in the box. The game comes from U&P Games, a Finnish company known in wargamer circle as the publisher of a game called W1815. It was a very simple wargame on Waterloo that I have been trying to get my hands on for a few years. This game reached a cult status because of its clever and minimalist design, and also for its wooden components that gave the game a very nice table presence. With Helsinki 1918, the people from U&P Games kept the same recipe, but on a much more grandiose scale. We'll find in the box 2 huge maps that you combine to show Helsinki and its surroundings. The scale of each hex is around 300 meters, so it gets pretty tactical. The map is really cleverly done, as it contains all relevant information to make the game run smoothly. You have the combat result table, all tracks for each players, a very nice reminder of the general turn order for each kind of activation, and other reminders to make the game flow nicely. Next to the maps, you also have 4 decks of cards. You've got cards for the whites, mostly enabling the white player to gain a bit more momentum during his activation or to impact the red's morale. You've got also a deck of cards for the Germans, consisting of battle assets such as machine guns to improve attacks or a naval bombardment to wear down the red units that would be on the coast. And then you have 2 decks for the communist players. One is consisting of assets, very much like the German deck, and another one consisting of major battle events. This one has only 5 cards, and you get to draw 2 or 3 cards of those at the beginning of the game that you can play as you see fit. There is also a rule book that is very short, 8 pages, and a bit dry, but I'll talk a little bit more about this later in the review. Then you've got the wooden components that are simple yet very, very nice. They serve as unit counters but also as markers for the box to track time, morale, HQ, common action for the Germans, etc. etc. And finally you have the box that is a bit of an odd format but quite cool. And what is really nice about this box is that part of it actually serves as a pretty handy player aid that you can keep on the side of the map for the players to remember basic mechanics such as the command system, the retreat bonus, movement, and other things. So that's it for the component. Now let's talk about how the game flows. You have 2 fronts. You have the German versus the red front, and this one I would say you have 3 major moments or phases that structures the overall battle. The first moment is the one around the fixed position on the northwest of the map. Reds are holding fortified position with a few units against a massive German forces that is only getting bigger and bigger. At this stage, the Reds are just trying to win as much time as possible and stay in command, because all units not in command, you risk of losing them when the night comes. The German, on the other hand, are trying to optimize their attacks to break this front as soon as possible. Smart use of superior HQ capabilities for the German and going crazy on the battle cards for key confrontation is actually key here. Then you've got a second phase, when the German actually have managed to cross the fortification and are approaching Helsinki. At this moment, German units are more or less crushing any resistance, as terrain is now of limited benefit for the Reds, and they are less mobile because of their poor command system. On the other hand, the Reds are trying to delay the Germans a bit and in the same time prepare the battle for Helsinki by taking key position on hills and on the outskirts of the city. And then you have the final battle for Helsinki. Here it can go 2 ways. Either the Reds actually manage to retreat properly and prepare their position to fight the Germans, and in this case it's going to be a fight for each X in the city. But if the Red didn't manage to prepare a nice welcoming party for the Germans, what is going to happen is that if the German player is actually using his HQ wisely, he's going to be once again able to rout Red units by taking control of victory hexes and surrounding them. Then you've got a second front, and this is the white versus the red front. This is a completely different game. It's a game not about traditional battle tactics, but about insurgency. So the mechanics of the whites is very different from the 2 other factions. They never become a real military forces, but as they appear directly in Helsinki, it forces the red player to mobilize units to control the uprising and prevent the red HQs to be destroyed as they are immobile. So the white player forms squads a bit randomly on the edges of the different hexes, and when the uprising is strong enough, they can start to actually organize units. Reds have to decide if they want to use command points or military resources to arrest those squads, or if they can wait. So it's really about striking a balance and accepting that you have a risk behind your back. This front acts as a small game in the game, as the mechanic is widely different from the other parts of the game, but the two become intertwined in the final moments of the battle. All in all, I would say that you are in for 3 to 4 hours gameplay, depending on if and when the red player resigns. The game stays tense and fresh all the way, as the different phases propose different kind of tactics and gameplay. So now that we've looked into how the game flows, how it works, let's discuss about the design and should you invest time and money into the game. For this game review, let's start by what I liked about the game. First of all, the artwork is amazing. The map is magnificent, the box is beautiful, the rulebook is clean, the cards are efficient. The art direction is just amazing and refreshing for a rather traditional hobby. Then the components. Even if the cards are a bit on the low quality side, overall the components are great. The map is very nicely done, very well thought, very practical, with a lot of clever design bits. The wooden pieces are simple but very nice and provide overall a great table presence. Now let's talk about the design. What you can feel straight away is that this game has been very refined. The rules are crisp, streamlined, and the rulebook is a perfect reflection of that. There are a lot of really clever design concepts, using the components in multiple ways. So that's something that blew my mind. The way units are used is very smart. The more German player loses units, the fastest he has to get to his objective, because each unit lost is actually removing some time units that he has access to finish the battle. This is brilliant as it makes it very concrete that there is a trade-off between taking casualties and going fast. And that's a very smart way of representing it. You have the same thing for the red player. Losing units actually impact the potential morale that you can get as it overlays on the morale track. So once again, you have to find a balance, and this balance is embedded within the map, within the physical aspect of the game, which is very, very clever. Then there is something that I was amazed by, and it's the innovative utilization of hexes. Hexagons have been part of the wargame designer toolbox for 50 years now, and this game did something that you rarely see. It found a new way of using this very established convention. In Helsinki 1918, you don't use the surface of the hex. Actually, you use it, that's true, but you don't only use it, you also use the edges and the vertices of the hex. This is pretty simple as an idea, but it's brilliant because it permits to simulate very efficiently how the German HQ is more powerful than the red HQ, and it's in a very elegant way. And this design choice is also here when you look into the way the whites play. You also place some squad on the edges of the hexagons and creates a lot of tension, a lot of asymmetry. And actually the way the whites play is very reminiscent of a game called Guerrilla Checkers. That is something that you can find on Board Game Geek. It was a game by Brian Train. It's a bit abstract, but it shows asymmetry in a war game, and it's very cleverly embedded within it. And once again, it relies on the fact that a hex is not only a surface, but also a geometrical shape, and it's very smartly done. Now what I didn't like. The first thing that I didn't like is that the rulebook was too streamlined. It is very well written, very clear, but also very dry. Each sentence has its importance, and it's easy to oversee an aspect of the rule that is actually breaking the game. I know that keeping the number of pages down may seem nice because it makes the game seem very approachable, but I think that in this case, 4 extra pages with some example of plays and notes on tactical implication of some design choices would have been awesome, and I think would have even more showcased the beauty of the design. Some innovation, I think, because it's a game with a lot of innovation, are a bit useless. One of them is movement. The way movement is handled is completely counterintuitive, and it feels like it's innovation for the sake of innovation. You don't really see a real design benefit of handling movement this way, and it seems like the traditional convention about managing hex movement the old way, the SES way, is actually perfect, and I don't see how this modification is an improvement. Then you've got some design aspects about the deployment and movement that can be a bit gamey, so there is a bit of, they tried something and not everything is super crisp, but overall that would be a minor thing, but I think it has to be considered, and it's an interesting discussion to have about innovation in convention for war games. The combat system is a bit too prone to luck. Maybe that's a personal thing. I like luck in games when it's lighter games or unhistorical games, but in conflict simulation games it's a bit tricky. And it's a bit of a shame when you know that when you actually throw 2 dice, it creates a very nice normal distribution. And the way it's handled, it's a bit in a Games Workshop way. You roll multiple dice and you get the best score. So you can mitigate luck, but I think it's a bit too prone to luck. And then final negative point on the game is in some aspects I feel like the game lacked a developer. What I mean by that is that the game feels the fruit of a brilliant designer, but it probably could have benefited from the outside point of view of a pragmatic game developer to actually cut into some design choices. I know it's only 8 pages, it's pretty crisp, it's pretty streamlined, but even though I don't think that everything in the game is relevant. And here I think specifically about the 2 outside battle or conflict or boxes. So it's basically the battle to gain control of the railway and managing the naval German support. So it's 2 outside boxes, they have a strategic and historical importance, they are relevant, but the way it's integrated in the game takes out of the flow, probably could have been abstracted, adds a bit of complexity, not really complex, but adds an element to the system that don't really needs it. But those are minor grievances. Then I have other comments that are neither positive or negative, and the first one is that it's not a 3-player game. I know it's advertised as a 3-player game, that you actually have 3 sides, but when you look into it, the white side is interesting to play for sure, but you don't get enough initiatives to play to stay involved in the game for that long. So unless you mostly like to watch games being played, I wouldn't advise to play 3 players. Then about the solo play, I had some question about is it nice to play solo? It's playable solo. The only thing that is a bit annoying is the red events, but I think if you randomize the events being triggered, you can play solo without an issue. And then I have another remark, which is the map. The map is huge, probably too huge for what it is. Actually, if you look into it, you probably have 20 to 25% of the map that is never going to be used. It takes a lot of space for what it is, and maybe it's too much, and I think it's a pretty fair complaint. But then again, if you have the space, it's fine. It's actually beautiful, so it's okay. Then finally, who should buy it? There are a lot of good reasons to get this game, but I would agree that it is not a game for everyone. If you have interest in wargame design, it's a must-have, as there are a lot of clever bits here that you can analyze and see how it works. It's very clever, and if you're interested in this topic, go for it. If you've always liked Hex Encounters game but thought they were getting old and it was an old convention that could never be refreshed, get this game because it will change your mind. If you have a strong interest in the theme, I think it's a fair thing to actually buy this game because as we'll see in the next section, it's a theme that hasn't had a lot of games. And then if you have a strong interest in coin simulation, it's also a good thing to get because it's a clever way of using it in a tactical game, because usually coin games are more strategic, political, you play cards, and embedding the coin mechanics into a tactical war game I think was really interesting, so it's a good reason to buy the game. Before talking about the place of the Finnish Civil War within the play culture, I would like to pay my respects to Brian Train, who has written a very comprehensive article on the subject. The link is also in the description. So, if the first game on the Finnish Civil War was actually released in 1918, just a few months after the end of the war, it actually stayed the only game on the subject for almost a century. The absence of this war in wargames is even more surprising if you consider the relative popularity of wargames about the Russo-Finnish War of 1939-1940. For context, the Winter War is a very interesting operation during the Second World War in which the Soviet Union struggled to overcome a small but super efficient Finnish army. This had a major impact on the Red Army, as some key reforms were taken after those events. Some of the reforms were the reduction of the role of the frontline political commissars and also a return to a more old-school rank and discipline system within the Red Army. So we have a Finnish theater that is actually pretty well known by wargamers during the Second World War, and you have some really good games covering it. You have Ren Winter by GMT, and even before that there was another game by GMT that was called Arctic Storm. Then Advanced Squad Leader has a module dedicated to the Winter War. In the SCS series, so the Standard Combat series by MMP, you also have Guerrilla 44, covering another part of the Second World War in Finland, but still another event around this theater, so the same place. And then you've got the Winter War from SPI and a lot of different games. So war games about the Finnish theater in the Second World War are actually pretty popular, but when it comes about the Finnish Civil War, you don't find anything. And a fun fact, I'm currently playing Reds by Ted Resser, a game on the Russian Civil War, and the events are happening at the same time as the Finnish Civil War. They are in the same geographical region as Finland, and Finland doesn't even appear on the map. By the way, it's a great game, but it's interesting to see that a game that is directly connected to the Finnish Civil War doesn't even show it. It's weird to see that Finland can be popular in Second World War, but is actually a theme that is not considered by wargame designer when it comes to the Civil War. Since 2009, some games on the subject finally started hitting the market. The first game on the Finnish Civil War was the one by Brian Train, released in the Compass Game magazine, called Finnish Civil War, and covering the whole conflict on a hex and counter map on a brigade level. Then in 2018, you've got the game Brother Against Brother, which is a card-driven game inspired by the Path of Glory system on a strategic scale and covering the whole war. This game also comes from a Finnish publisher and designer and was released after a successful Kickstarter campaign. The game looks awesome and appears to be a great entry level to card-driven games. Then you've got Helsinki 1919, also released last year. And finally, you have an upcoming game in the GMT coin series called All Bridges Burning, about the same events, that should come in 2019. It's a bit hard to understand why we waited for a century before creating other games on the subject, but when you look at this short game list, you can see that two things are clear on the impact of why the interest on the Finnish Civil War is actually raising a little bit in the last couple of years. First of all, you have Finnish board game designers who are more prone to explore their own history and to create board games about the subject. And then you have a growing interest of the wargamer community into insurgency wars. So those are my 2 cents on the rise of games around the Finnish Civil War. Overall, I really enjoyed the game. I think you should probably consider playing it if you have any interest in subjects around insurgency or the Finnish Civil War. That's all for today. Feedbacks on the video or suggestions about future subjects in the comment sections are very welcome. Thank you for watching Homo Ludens, and see you next time.